He's there was some lightning rod topics. His name might have come up a couple times during the Alex Jones trial as an example
Oh, it did.
of
Yes, it
such
did.
things that cost Alex $2.5 trillion. All right, so RFK there at the end talking about the creation of a culture that perpetually precipitates war, funded by American taxpayer dollars in order to dominate and conquer the rest of the world. That was the legacy of the people who killed Kennedy. He was about to pull him out of Vietnam. As soon as they got Kennedy out of the way, they're like full speed Vietnam. Let's boot up Bell helicopter, LBJ, get those people going over there, get those young kids going and dying for our agenda. Why are we in Vietnam? The British and French have been working there for hundreds of years, and they needed some new property management on the
They wanted to
situation.
work on the Phoenix program
Yeah,
and a number of other situations. They
a
use the
number of
guise
other,
of
yeah.
communism, but it's like we want
Richard
to
Secord,
call it
and
weapons testing.
you
Yeah.
call it human trafficking, call
Human
it
trafficking. Yeah,
drug
absolutely.
smuggling,
A whole
call
bunch of
it
shit.
black ops, call it black ops.
Black
Slush funds,
ops.
they called it the enterprise back in the
Yeah, the
day.
Enterprise, sure. They
That's
reappropriated that during the 1980s with BCCI.
oddly enough, it was also the name of the first space shuttle. Though the Enterprise was the first built, it never took flight. And Columbia was the one that took first flight. It
Hmm.
was second built.
Oh, interesting.
Also, the year before Columbia took off, I think 1980 or 81. Moonraker, the famous James Bond movie, advertised this space shuttle program. And I'm pretty sure it's in that movie that he runs across a soundstage where they're filming the moon landing.
It is.
That's Moonraker.
It's
Welcome
also
back,
a
Jay. What's
Hey,
up,
fantastic
man?
example of eugenics. Sorry. Such a
hey, good to be back. Yeah, it's absolutely Moonraker's all about Hugo Drax being a little Jeff Stein McCaffrey starting his own new race of human beings, right?
yeah, like either up in the orbit and they're gonna do something. I fear the release a virus or have some type of
He's got these bioweapons that
yep.
are formulated from some kind of Amazonian flower, and they're going to kill off most of the population except for his biological descendants. And he's chosen basically the hottest babes of each race.
Except for Jaws and Oddjob. Somehow they got on there. If that's
So
that was
it
always
was
the
like
one.
part
Or
Jeffrey
Jaws and
Epstein.
yeah. Like,
A
Epstein
little
was
bit,
inspired by
yeah,
Hugo Drax.
exactly. Yeah.
Well,
Also, in the
yeah,
novel, Drax is just the guy who's basically wanting revenge on Britain. So he's doing the V2 rocket program. So he wants to blow up Britain because Britain's bad and the Germans, Britain's good. And well, he's saying the British are the right guilty ones in World War II, which is kind of true. So
very true.
yeah, a
yeah,
lot of those Bond villains actually give you some
exactly. Yeah,
foreshadowing of what's actually going on, and then just conceptualize that MI6 and the Bond villains work together because
absolutely.
that's how it works at that level. Now, last week you're doing some 007. Let's see, is that going to work? Was it Golden Eye? What were you
We
into? The
did. We did.
90s Bond films last week?
We did all the '90s. Correct. We did the Pierce Brosnan era. So that was a lot of fun because some of that I looked at maybe 10 years ago. So I haven't looked at a lot of it in a long time. But going back and doing the four '90s Pierce Brosnan ones were actually there was more in there than I expected. There's quite a bit. One common theme that you wouldn't expect in the four '90s ones, because this is post Cold War, is that every one of them has the capitalist communist dialectic at work. So
Yeah.
basically,
Yes.
Bond is still fighting and allying with communists because in the one with the Chinese operative, they have to make an alliance to destroy the uh, media baron, who's basically like a Ted Turner character,
Was
right?
that the Living Daylights?
No,
It's either the world is not
that's
enough or tomorrow never dies. One of those two, but I can't remember.
Living Daylights is '80s. That's Timothy Dalton era, but
Oh, you're right.
in
It's tomorrow never dies. The one with the Chinese like
that's it.
secret agent. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so she's Chinese communist agent, and Bond and her make an alliance. Interestingly, in the Dalton one, I think it's Living Daylights, he gets the Order of Lenin as a reward. So they actually give Bond the Communist Award, Order of Lenin.
The communist seal. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I
He
I
bet
don't know. I remember
also
seeing
a
that
young
one.
Klaus Schwab was wishing that he would have gotten that award.
exactly. By the way, the if you go back to the Dalton ones too, there are there's all kinds of crazy stuff in that one. One of them, the first one, there's a cameo of Wayne Newton and they're running a cult in like the Bahamas or somewhere, this international crime organization, but they're doing this the slush fund money funneling, and they're funding the cult with drug funds in some kind of like tin pot dictatorship in some Latin American, South American island, and that money is going to build bioweapons, and it's exactly the stuff that you read about in the Gladio book that I was just talking to you about, Richard, where there's a
That's a
chapter.
Peter L. Williams book.
Yeah, there's a chapter where he talks about how the Vatican was funneling money to Iran Contra type stuff based on the Paul Hellyer model of doing black ops drug stuff to sell drugs to fund black ops, basically. So they were doing that by a bunch of shell corporations that had a bunch of like Cayman Island, cutouts. And that diagram that you had in that video, or that you tweeted that video that showed the old CIA clip of how complicated their money laundering was.
Yeah, yeah.
This is exactly like that, like the shell companies that they had. Anyway, that comes up in that Bond movie. Is what I'm trying to say. This model.
Yeah, they have a lot of reflections. Newton. Yeah, Wayne Newton. I mean, there's not too many movies. You got Vegas Vacation. He doesn't make many cameos. He did his voice in the Ferris Bueller, but he didn't.
He's running a sex cult. It's a sex cult.
Yeah, like an Epstein Island type of guy back then.
Exactly, and we all know
learned it from Wayne Newton.
Everybody wanted
Epstein was a Wayniac.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, did anybody want to act? Did women actually want Wayne Newton, or was he some sort of? Seems like a weird.
They wanted him to say
popularized by
afterwards.
So look at this. I listed these as one example in that.
That wasn't the Banco Ambrosiano, was it, Jay?
That is the one. That's the bank that's in. That's it. That's the bank that's in Italy.
Yeah.
But look at all these front companies and banks that were. The Vatican had their account actually in these islands, right? So here's just some of them: Castle Bank and Trust, World Commerce Foundation, Mercantile Bank and Trust, Nugan Bank. That's the one that's in, I think, like Miami or somewhere. International Diversified Corp, Underwriters Bank, BCCI, Franklin National Bank, Cayman Islands, Hemburrows Bank, which was set up by an OSS and British intelligence guy. Castle Bank and Trust, I already named that one. Anyway, those are just some of the two, but Castle Bank and Trust is the one that Paul Hellawell, I said Hellyer, I meant Paul Hellawell.
Yeah, Paul Hellawell.
Yeah.
But the Nugan Bank, I think that goes all the way back to when these people funded the Nazis, because those are the same people that killed JFK. And in that power vacuum after JFK, they took over and they did all the Iran Contra and funding of Mujahideen type things.
Exactly. There's a brief thing here. Could I read this, or would you rather?
Please do. Because I got some quotes from this book too.
This is not very long. It's just a couple paragraphs. 146. Castle Bank and Trust. One of the first operations in this is 62, was Castle Bank and Trust, which was established in the Cayman Islands by Paul Hellawell in 1962. He's one of the characters that had the idea, together with Angleton and others, to fund the Black Ops with the drug money for the CIA. This bank, according to Penny Lernoux, in the author In Banks We Trust, formed a bridge between the poppy fields of Thailand and the organized crime in the United States. While Hellawell retained his dual role as a CIA paymaster from the off-record accounts and a mobster's account, Hellawell organized an entire Caribbean banking circuit and numerous Panamanian shell companies. He continued to operate Sea Supply and became the Thai consul in Miami, operating out of the American Bankers Insurance Building. Ever industrious, Hellawell was also able to serve as legal counsel to Meyer Lansky's protege, Santo Traficante, and an advisor to LBJ. The Cayman Islands represented an ideal place for these offshore banking companies. The nation, 13,500 residents, 14,000 telex numbers for banks, sometimes no more than tiny offices. The Cayman Islands offered a degree of secrecy that matched that of Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Liechtenstein. Within a decade, the Castle Bank was joined the Caymans by a branch of Nugan, the World Finance Corporation. All three dealt with the CIA, the Vatican, and Santos Traficante.
Now, there's a huge overlap. Here's what Jay's reading from. It's called Operation Gladio by Peter L. Williams, the unholy alliance between the Vatican, the CIA, and the Mafia. And I would say just add MI6 and probably the Mossad. We got the whole solution. But this is a couple slices of the pie. And what I wanted to show the audience are the cast of characters.
Yeah.
You've got Dulles, Donovan, Reinhard Galen, Angleton, Lucky Luciano, some Italian bankers, some P2 secret society type guys, because all those things tie together. Roberto Calvi, specifically Brzezinski, Rockefeller, and then in the chronology, it reads just like Whitney Webb's timeline.
I was
Her
going to
books
say she has
start in
72
1942 with
references
Lucky,
for Hellowell in
right?
there. I mean, like, yeah, in this private.
So like here's where her book starts, because she's got a 2-volume set. It starts with Lucky Luciano starting to do business with the Office of Naval Intelligence. However, in 1938, Operation Underworld starts with MI6 recruiting Lucky Luciano, so the Americans are 4 years behind, right? So if you include MI6 at the top of this all makes a lot more sense, especially in the Operation Gladio sense, because it's truly an Anglo-American operation.
Yeah.
But it goes through, the CIA is established, where they're bringing in heroin. You've got the strategy of tension that plays out, and then Operation Condor, and then the CIA funds Opus Dei. They got BCCI set up. Kissinger Safari Club with Adnan Khashoggi, who also co-founded it. That's mentioned in Whitney's books. And then it goes down. So this is the Kerry Commission, where they investigated it, Colby's mysterious death, these sort of things. So this book is really well documented, and it has a good list of abbreviations. And so once you know the grammar, now you can go ahead and start to understand these crime networks and how they work with intelligence in an international fashion to change history in their image. Like, they create terrorist attacks and blame it on other people. They use proxy forces, and this is one of the key handbooks or texts. So I'm glad you brought it up, Jay. What other quotes you got to drop on us?
There's a really good section.
I'm going to read this one next, and I'll just show you the title of it. That's in this book, so we're going to look at that.
Insane. I forgot about the connection too between the original foundation of AIG, Cornelius van der Star, and Paul Hellowell. Yeah. I mean,
he's got a section on AIG in here.
That's crazy.
There's a great section too where I'm trying to find it, where he talks about the way that he argues that Kissinger actually set up the model of how to run Italy through P2. And it's weird because it's designed as like a pyramid structure on the bottom and then a pyramid inverted that touches at the points. And so basically you kind of had Kissinger as the organizer of the structure, he argues. And this is what allowed the CIA, he argues, to directly basically control the entire Italian government, because due to the Cold War, and then William Colby being in Italy at the time of Gladio kicking off, he was the point man between Donovan and those guys to make sure that the Vatican would be on the side of the CIA and not allow the Soviets or the leftist communists to have any influence when they were running against the Christian Democratic Party. So one of the main reasons for this black market funding was to ensure that the Vatican signed on, because basically the CIA said, look, we'll make sure that the Christian Democratic Party, which was basically the CIA front party, that they win the elections. And we're also going to have these deals that, you know, this money comes to you, you're going to kind of do what we want to do during this Cold War period. So this is kind of where the Vatican begins to be kind of roped into basically doing what the CIA wants. And then you see that really heavily with John Paul II being absolutely 100% a Cold War CIA symbolic figure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, but I actually had this drawn out in a little note.
I mean, there's a lot of propaganda. Yeah. When you think of John Paul II standing that whole, when he was in Poland and standing up against the communists, and that church scene where
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
There's a book by John Kaler, who's a pro CIA writer. He's basically a kind of a whitewasher for the CIA, but he even in his book he admits that. He's like, we filmed those photos of John Paul like that intentionally. He says they were photo ops. Yeah. I'm trying to find like, that Kissinger said, go ahead.
Who's the guy who went into Buchenwald? They flew in a producer. I forget his
Billy
name.
Wilder.
Billy Wilder. Yeah, I thought it was Billy Wilder. Yeah, yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that was
famous Hollywood Billy Wilder.
Yeah,
there's a documentary about
Yeah.
There's a documentary about Billy Wilder, and in that documentary, it shows his filmmaking work in Germany, and then how he was like a political person who got exiled. So he came to America, and then he started working for the United States government, making American propaganda. And Billy Wilder goes over with the psychological warfare team, including Charles Douglas Jackson, the guy who owns the Zapruder film later for Time Life. Yeah, C.D. Jackson. And Billy Wilder You could see Billy Wilder in some of the footage. There was where he goes in and does the slate. He's got his little beret and stuff on.
And they make
and then
the
when you
local
know his
population
history,
march through and do the whole 9 yards with the propaganda instead of there. Not
the
making
humiliation,
any claim on, but
the kind of struggle session that they put the people through afterwards to denazify him. He's part of all that.
Right.
And very interesting history Mr. Wilder has.
Yeah, if you want to read something, Rich, go ahead. I really wanted to find that little diagram, because the way he described it, the way that Kissinger was controlling this was pretty wild. It's kind of ingenious and like a Machiavellian.
Was the double pyramid symbolism? Was that sort of the idea that there'd be like there'd be a ruling class, but then above ruling class, that's sort of like, in other words, like there's the facade of those that are elected rulers within the Italian parliament or whatever.
Yes, that's it.
And then, but on top of that, then there's actually those that the unelected ruling class that will make sure that, look, you guys get to call the shots, but to a certain degree,
that's right.
We filter the money. We want certain projects to be done and certain money to be filtered through us. As long as that's not compromised, we're going to make sure that those elections happen that way.
I remember how I remember it now. So the parliament is the base of the pyramid for the public.
Okay.
Above them is the P2 Lodge, which then answers to Licio Gelli or Jelly.
Okay.
Right. And then he's at the tip of that pyramid, basically running the government for the CIA, which supposedly Kissinger was. So basically Kissinger would tell Licio Gelli what he wanted, and then that's how all of Italy was run, was the argument.
Yeah.
I remember now.
So that's propaganda dupe, the whole P2
that's
scandal.
The Masonic Lodge, right?
Yeah, that we're gonna tie into that for a second. But first, I want to put it to rest that Jay is just stealing my look from back in the day, because once upon a time, I had the Miami look too.
Is that you on the right?
Well played.
Is that Tony on the left?
Let's go to propaganda dupe. This is how you roll with the punches, Tony. I'm just showing you how it works. Propaganda dupe was a Masonic lodge created in like a secret society sense. So it's part cartel, it's part Masonic lodge. A lot of lodges might be part of a cartel. Ask that question. And this is a part of the Operation Gladio organized crime. But if you take a step back, you mentioned Kissinger a couple minutes ago. This whole opium and heroin trafficking seems to be an overlying theme for a lot of these groups, right? And if you follow the Dope Inc. book, it's British had a monopoly on the opium trade, and then it gets handed over. This is their claim back in the 70s to Kissinger Associates.
Yeah.
And then you've got, people from Kissinger Associates telling us there's a super class, telling us that Osama bin Laden did 9/11 and they work at one of the places where the thing exploded. Like, there's a whole lot of things that just roll out of Kissinger Associates in and of itself. I'm not saying that claim is true, but with all these other layers you start putting onto this, it looks a lot more like there is an over super national group of people who do like black ops and assassinations and false terror attacks and money laundering and arms provision and all these sorts of things. Because it's not just Licio Gelli, who's an interesting character, who's in charge of Banco Ambrosiano, and then Michaela Sindona ends up hanging under the Blackfriars Bridge upside down, like one of the tarot cards. And that's all NATO, MI6, CIA. Like, this is a whole bunch of people who covered up for the Nazis and funded the Nazis in the first place type of activities, which brings us back to the Vatican Bank in this situation, because the Vatican Bank ran the Nazi rat lines and helped the Nazis preserve money after World War II. And they were working with CIA and MI6 up to their eyeballs and all this sort of stuff. So it makes sense that when you fast forward 40 years, they're still doing it, because the people never found out they were doing it in the first place to stop it or anything like that. Right? What do you see from your side on that?
Absolutely. I think that, as Williams notes and other writers on this topic, one reason that they really were interested in the Vatican Bank was that it's considered the most secret bank in the world, supposedly. I'm not sure how you determine that, if it's secret.
Well, the Vatican's its own nation state. So in a way, it doesn't have the same sort of maybe statutes available, or
that's the argument Williams mentions. I just meant like, if I was just making a joke that if it's secret, like anyway. But because it's not susceptible to a lot of international laws, that the CIA saw, well, hey, here's a bank that could potentially be useful. So what could we do to compromise and use that bank. And the argument was in his book is that, well, the Vatican was really in a situation of need, during as the Cold War was ramping up. And so there was this threat, outside threat from communism. And so let's make sure that they're on our side. And then it's beyond that, though, because there's another book that you guys would probably want to get a hold of. I just got it, so I haven't gotten deep into it, but it's a pretty recent book that came out. And it's about this kind of stuff. It's Errand into the Wilderness. Have you heard of that?
No.
What's it all about? This is a guy who wrote his PhD on the CIA and religion.
Well, that's interesting. So,
okay. Alan Dulles and the World Federation of Churches and stuff like that.
Yeah,
World
exactly.
Council of Churches, I think it was.
Right, which was originally Protestant, but they wanted really to coax the Roman Catholic Church to being a part of it because it's a Rockefeller-created entity. Right? If you go back to the Rockefellers' authorized biography by Collier and Horowitz, they have a chapter on all the money that Rockefeller Sr. gave to the establishment of NCC and WCC. And they really become fronts for soft power, basically. They want to turn the church into soft. That's the goal here, is to make
World Council of Churches, the WCC. I do have one passage that's worth reading out of this Operation Gladio book. Because this ties into a whole bunch of stuff we already talked about, and it gives better explanation. So let me square it up and zoom for you. This is from page 32 under a section called Ghetto Gold. And they're not talking about rap albums. Here we go. World War II, it disrupted international shipping and imposed tight waterfront security that made smuggling heroin into the United States almost impossible. Heroin supplies were small and international crime syndicates had fallen into disarray. But opiates were becoming the rage of the jazz scene in Harlem, and demand for heroin was increasing day by day among Black musicians in New York, where a hit could cost as much as $100. Paul Hellawell, dealing with the drug lords of Burma, was keenly aware of this fact. So he treats it like an entrepreneurial opportunity, use little Chairman Mao, OSS, intelligent connection. Now let's go down here to this, because this is where it starts breaking open. You start to see some familiar names. Let's get this in focus for everybody. Boom, boom, lock it. Hellawell, the son of a prominent English cloth buyer, was a member of the inner circle of the OSS, which became the Oh So Social Club, along with other wealthy American dignitaries, including Henry Sturgis Morgan, son of J.P. Morgan Jr., Nicholas Roosevelt, Paul Mellon, son of Andrew Mellon, David K.E. Bruce, Andrew Mellon's son-in-law, also in OSS, and members of the Vanderbilt, Carnegie, DuPont, and Ryan families. I mean, that's some highfalutin families right there. As Angleton, as noted, was a graduate of Yale and the son of Hugh Angleton, a multimillionaire who owned the Italian franchise of the National Cash Register Company, NCR. NCR was Angleton's dad. Angleton's dad was like a spook over in Italy in the first place, right? So Angleton is second generation, and he was trained in London. He used to speak with a British accent. So he's the Anglo-American and the American-Israeli mole in our intelligence organization for decades. Yep. So they got NCR. Dulles was a Princeton graduate and the senior partner to Wall Street firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, which represented the Rockefeller Empire and funded the Nazis and other mammoth trusts, corporations, and cartels. He was also a board member of the J. Henry Schrödinger Bank, with offices in Wall Street, London, Zurich, and Hamburg, because it's a German bank, Schroeder Bank.
Schroeder Bank is Dulles is involved in that, and I think it's page 1049 or 59 of Tragedy and Hope. That funds Hitler.
Yeah, I pronounced it wrong the first time, but it's the Schroeder Bank of New York. While Bill Donovan was an Ivy League lawyer, and he had married Ruth Ramsey, the heiress of one of the richest families in America. So that's how he got his job. Donovan justified the practice of recruiting the social elite for the OSS by saying, you can hire a second-story man and make him into a better second-story man, but if you hire a lawyer or an investment banker or a professor, you'll have something else besides. So when Hellawell, who was not a second-story man, communicated his idea to the OSS brass, he was assured of a captive audience. Donovan, Angleton, and Dulles viewed Hellawell's proposal as an answered prayer. Selling SPAC to the black jazz subculture would provide the U.S. intelligence community with a steady supply of revenue for gladio work throughout the post-war era. So these are proxy armies that they can fight, not in the name of a war in the United States, but just for overthrowing countries and taking their stuff for corporations that are international after World War II. And cold cash, Donovan knew, would become the key weapon of the new agency. He remained hell-bent on establishing as soon as he got back to Washington. And then here's the C.D. Jackson tie-in, because he worked for Henry Luce. And Henry Luce was Skull and Bones.
Right.
Skull and Bones was 1832 when they privatized the opium syndicate. They opened it up to privateers, and that's Yale, the East India Company's installment in America, the opium monopoly of the world. They got privateering license, and that's where the money for Skull and Bones comes from. That's what their legacy defends.
Is psychological warfare. And then, it's almost like whether it was part of Operation Mockingbird or if it was just an analog to that, he then goes and becomes an executive of Time Life by the late 1950s.
Well, really important as well in regard to the Roman Catholic Church that we were just talking about, the Vatican, is that C.D. Jackson's the brains behind the doctrinal warfare program, which when they recruited John Courtney Murray, the famous Jesuit, his job was to be the point man with the CIA amongst the Jesuits to make sure that the Vatican II documents went along with what the CIA.
Wait, he's one of the foundation elements of Vatican II, like in those documents and like those sort of.
C.D. Jackson is the architect
of
the
way.
doctrinal warfare. It's called the Doctrinal Warfare Program, which was the way that the CIA would ensure that the Vatican would be aligned with the CIA for the rest of the Cold War, and which is basically
and it sort of opens
Vatican
up the secular liberalism, Vatican II, as far as dogma is concerned.
Yeah, David Wimhoff's book is crucial.
That's fascinating. So he's all over the place then. C.D. Jackson. Okay,
Absolutely.
I mean, I knew he was all over the place, but I didn't realize he had that sort of influence even over in Italy.
Well, he's somebody's Renfield. We know whose Renfield he is.
Oh, sure.
Henry Luce and Nelson Rockefeller's. I mean, it's so Henry. Here's the quote, and then we'll finish up from page 33. Henry Luce, the founder of Time Life Empire, argued that America was the rightful heir to Great Britain's international primacy and heralded the post-war era as the American century. To justify their entanglement in foreign adventures, American Cold Warriors embraced a militarily anti-communist ideology. In their minds, the entire world was locked in a Manichaean struggle between godless communism and the free world. And the point I want to make about that is that the hand